Okay, let's see who started here. Let's see. I've got 5 here. Am I looking for anyone? Okay. Um, Colby, I think. Colby? Are you able to log in? Ah, there we go. All right, sounds great. Okay, well, let's start playing our game. Let's play Family Feud. All right, first question. A customer who just tries to disguise a deposit of more than $10,000 by making multiple smaller deposits is guilty of A. Structuring, B. Layering, C. Placement, or D. Integration. We're in the middle of Kahoot. I'm not. You can try and log in if you can. If it lets you begin mid game. So your Kahoot.it and your PIN is 974156. Okay. So this trying to deposit more than $10,000, making multiple small deposit, that is known as structuring. Yeah, and maybe they're trying to fly under the radar of the currency transaction report. You're supposed to file a report for any transaction of $10,000. So if they make small ones, maybe they're trying to get noticed, right, to get around that. All the other three, those are the three processes of money laundering. Right? Placement, which is taking this illegally gotten money and putting it into the financial system. Layering, which then involves moving that money around until you can't figure out where it came from anymore. And then integration, taking this now laundered money and putting it back into use or back into circulation for legitimate or illegitimate purposes. Okay. It sounds like layering would also make sense. It could, but this one specifically, the multiple deposits of $10,000, that's that gives you the thing of structuring. That's what it's doing. Okay. All right, let's see who's got some points here. Okay, Ashley and Alicia are scoring some points. And remember, the sooner you answer, right, the faster you answer, the more points you score. So try and be as fast and accurate as possible. Dan enters several orders in complex securities without concerns on the returns or losses. Which stage of money laundering? A. Layering. B. Structuring. C. Placement. Placement. All right. Well, nice job. The best choice was indeed layering. That's moving that money around without so be able to trace it. So yeah, that's one of the things that you could that covers that warning sign. If they don't seem concerned about returns, losses, expenses, things that people would normally be concerned about. Very good. All right, a bunch of people moved on the board now. Let's take our next question. The process of making money that appears to come from legal activities when it came from illegal activities is called A. Layering, B. Placement, C. Integration, or D. Hey, great job. Money laundering. Yes, that's exactly what that is, right? Okay, that's all right. Now the other three ones are the 3 stages of money laundering, but the whole process itself is money laundering. Okay, Kimberly moves into the lead. Pretty good. Let's check our next one. An officer of a financial firm has identified suspicious behavior on the part of the customer involving more than $5,000. The firm must file an SAR by the end of the day. B. The firm must file an SAR within 5 business days. C. The firm must file an SAR within 180 calendar days. D. The firm must file an SAR within 30 calendar days. Right. Yeah, this is one of those, something just doesn't look right. We fill out the SAR, suspicious activity form, right, which has to be filed with FinCEN within 30 calendar days. Yeah, I know. It seems like a long time to wait. for suspicious behavior, but that is the rule. Okay, Karina moves into the lead in a streak of 3. Suspicious activity reports, SARs, are A. Filed with the SEC as required by the Securities Exchange Act of 1933. B. Filed only for analysis of potential problematic patterns. C. Filed with the FinCEN as required by the Securities, or D. Filed with FINRA as required by the Congress. Filed with FinCEN, exactly. FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is a division of the Treasury Department, especially for investigating money laundering or potential money laundering. Yes, and it's under the Patriot Act of 2001. That's the one that came in the wake of September 11th. What does the Securities Exchange Act require? Well, first off, it says Securities Exchange Act of 1933. That's not quite right. The Securities Exchange Act is 1934. The Securities Act is 1933. All right, Kimberly in the lead. Alexis with a streak of 3. The specifically designated nationals SDN list must be checked. A. Prior to each opening a new account. C. Prior to Awesome. Yes, it's a clean sweep here for opening a new account for an individual. Exactly. Yeah, the SDN list, right? That's like, yeah, okay. Great, Alexa. Yeah, it's like that's the FAA's equivalent of the no-fly list. So any new accounts have to be scrubbed against the SDN list. Notice that's for individuals or other entities. That can mean like businesses, nonprofit organizations. Always have to be checked against that. All right, everyone's got some points. Now Alexis with a streak of 4. Next question. Which of the following is not a function of the Office of Foreign Asset Control, OFAC? A. Maintain the specifically designated nationals list. B. Control the assets of U.S. broker-dealers in foreign countries. C. Block assets of persons on the specifically designated nationals list. D. Prohibit broker-dealers from dealing with certain individuals and businesses. Right. Notice that this one, what is not a function? What do they do? No. Which one they don't do? Okay. 3 they do and 1 they don't, and they do not control the assets of broker-dealers in foreign countries. Right, but they do the OFAC, right, maintains that SDN list, which also blocks assets and also prohibits broker-dealers from dealing with them. That's exactly it. All right, Alexis moves into the lead. If a broker-dealer suspects a transaction involves funds from illegal activities, at what threshold is an SAR triggered? A. At least $10,000 in funds for other assets. B. More than $5,000 in funds for other assets. C. At least $5,000 in funds for other assets. Or D. More than $10,000 in funds for assets. Okay. Interesting enough, it was at least $5,000 rather than more than $5,000. I know there's like that pickier. But had it been more than 5,000, rather a deposit of $5,000 exactly would not trigger the SAR. $5,000 in one would. If you're thinking of the $10,000, that's the threshold for the currency transaction report. All right. Well, no one gained any points this time, so let's move on to our next one. Which of the following is the first stage in the money laundering process? A. Initiation. B. Layering. Yep, placement is that first placement, right? It's placement, then layering, then integration, PLI. Okay. Initiation, well, it kind of sounds plausible, but initiation is not a stage in the money laundering process. And by the way, whenever 3 is something like there is here, that's a perfect setup also for a all the following except kind of question. All right, Alexis and Hannah are both getting some points. Let's check our next one. Deposits received in amounts over $10,000 a day would require the firm to report the transaction to A. SAR within 15 days, SAR within 30 days, CTR within 30 days, or CTR. I didn't have a chance to finish before I could answer. Nice work. Okay. CTR within 15 days. Correct. Yeah, the SAR suspicious activity report, that's not suspicious, just deposit $10,000, but it does require a currency transaction report. All right, a bunch of other people added some points. That's our next one. Financial institutions must report a questionable event transaction or series of events or transactions too. A. Good, FinCEN, that's exactly it. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. That's it perfectly. Okay. Hannah's 3 in a row. Next one. Under the USA Patriot Act, financial firms must create and maintain records of wire transfers only to retail investors, B, of $3,000 or more, C, to bank customers, or D, to a different. Good deal. Okay, yes, records of wire transfers. Right. Remember, they only filed the currency transaction report of $10,000, but still maintain records of $3,000 or more. Very good. And Alexis is 4 in a row. Money laundering activities are most easily caught during which phase? A, placement, B, structure, C, grading. Okay, yeah, it's placement. That's when they can most easily catch it, but they're trying to integrate, illegally gotten money into the system. That's where they usually show up. Remember that structuring is not one of the 3 phases of the money laundering, right? That's adding deposits over, in smaller amounts to look like they're trying to avoid the currency transaction report. Well, Kimberly has some points. Next one, and last one. A customer wishes to deposit $20,000 in cash into her account. This requires A, file the CTR with FinCEN, B, file the SAR with FinCEN, C, verification source of funds. Hey, there you go. Okay, right, filing a CTR, right? More than $10,000, so it follows the currency transaction report. Nothing suspicious going on here, so you don't need an SAR. All right, and let's see how we did. All right, in 3rd place, bronze medalist, Kimberly. In 2nd place, silver medal, okay. And in 1st place, gold medal and Olympic champion, Alexis. All right.
No, sorry, I pushed the wrong button.
Oh, okay, no problem. All right, let me go ahead and close this one out. All right, welcome back. And now today's section here, let me do a screen share again. Okay, hold on a second. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay, so section 10, next section here is on individual customer accounts and suitability. So of course, there's the information on what type of accounts do we open for someone, and there are many different types of accounts. So we want to make sure we open the right type of account. Individual accounts, joint accounts, company accounts, custodial accounts. Let's see what else. Fiduciary accounts, retirement accounts. Well, actually, retirement accounts will come later. Suitability, well, that's the making sure we make the right recommendation to someone, right? Any recommendations has to be suitable to the person we make it to. So let's start taking a look at accounts for individuals. Okay. So folks, well, when opening a new account, well, like as many things in this world, it starts off with some paperwork. Right. So open an account, the rep has to get information and also has to verify the customer's name, right? Full legal name, a street address, a real street address, not a P.O. box. We can mail to a P.O. box, but we got to have the actual address on file. Date of birth, that also confirms that they're of legal age, and Social Security or tax ID number. And we need that because, well, one is for the tax reporting and the 1099 forms, but also that helps confirm that they are who they say they are, right? It's all part of our identifying customer identification. We also need to ask if someone's employed at another broker-dealer or financial institution, because if they are, if someone works for another FINRA member and wants to open an account at a different firm, there are certain restrictions that apply here, right? There's certain FINRA rules that the former employer needs to be notified, or the current employer needs to be notified. And also requires the signature of the principal, the supervisor who approved the account. If they're going to make recommendations, then also the rep's signature has to be on there too. What about the customer? Doesn't the customer have to sign the new account form? Well, interestingly enough, no. At least not according to regulators, right? A customer signature is not required on a new account form, at least not for a cash account. And you're saying, but wait a minute, at my firm, we require the customer to sign everything. Well, keep in mind that the test is about industry regulations, not about your firm's policies. Yeah, I mean, it is much more common for firms to require a signature, but it is not required under regulations, right? So there may be times, and this is one of the cases where sometimes you have to put aside policies on which you've been trained just to focus on the right answers for the test. We also were going to ask about their citizenship. Okay, so if they're not a U.S. citizen, we need a foreign passport, and whether the customer is also an officer or director of a public or officer, director, or 10% shareholder of a publicly traded company. Why? Because an officer, director, or 10% shareholder is defined as an insider who may be in possession of material inside information. So we have to know that because before they can start trading on the stocks or the securities of which they're an officer or insider for the company, we need to know about that. All right, customer account records are retained for 6 years. 6 years from, well, basically until 6 years from when they're used, or 6 years until after the customer closes the account. They have to be kept on file for 6 years. All right, the Patriot Act, like we talked about, the Patriot Act 2001, also we need to verify a customer's name. We need to verify address, social or tax ID, or date of birth, or actually all these things. How can you do so? Well, that's why we request a unexpired government-issued photo ID, right? A driver's license, a state-issued ID, a passport, a military DOD card, a green card, right? Those are things that are government-issued. So those will all work. That will help us define that, that they are who they say they are. But what if they're opening an account by phone and we can't see a driver's license? Well, then firms have a customer identification program. So they need to have written procedures on exactly how they will verify someone's ID. If they can't see like a photo ID or something, what other methods, what we call non-documentary methods, can they use? Now, let me write that term out here. Okay, these would be non-documentary methods. So what kind of methods can they use? Well, they could get a referral from another financial institution who has verified someone's ID. They could get information from the databases from the credit bureaus, right? The Experience and TransUnion, Equifax. Okay, those will also keep on there as well. All right, records to keep about rating ID has to be kept on file for 5 years. And as I said before, and as kind of we alluded to before, but before we can open an account, right, the name has to be scrubbed against the specially designated nationals list, okay, the SDN list from the Office of Foreign Asset Control, right? That they're not on they're at our equivalent of the no-fly list. Okay. Now, when someone opens the account, they give us their information, right? All the information that is required of them. We also ask for some requested information. We ask for things like income, net worth, tax brackets, things that will help us determine, well, what would be a suitable investment for this person? What's their goals and purposes? What much risk are they willing or able to take? So after they open the account, within 30 days, they're going to receive another letter from us with all the information they provided, and it gives us a chance to make sure everything's correct and make any adjustments as necessary. Every 36 months after that, we're going to ask them to do the same thing. Take a look and find out, is the information still up to date and current? After all, situations change, right? Maybe their investment objectives have changed after a while. Maybe their income or net worth has changed, hopefully for the better. Every 3 years or every 36 months, we're going to need an update. Okay. All right. FINRA's Know Your Customer rule, KYC, Know Your Customer. So we use reasonable diligence to collect essential information. Like I said, these are best. They're going to try. Remember, to attempt to obtain customer's identity, investment history, investment objectives, and source of funds. Now, this is requested information, and again, it helps us determine recommendations. It does also look for suspicious activities. But if we don't have this information, like I said, it is not required. It is requested information. So we can still open the account even if someone has not disclosed things like their investment objectives and their risk tolerance and things like that. However, since we don't have this information to help us determine would a recommendation be suitable to that person or not, well, then we just can't make recommendations. Okay, so we can't without that information. Okay, so in that case, right, then all transactions must be unsolicited. Okay, right. The customer has to call and say, "This is what I want to trade." We cannot have any solicited transactions. That's where we call the customer and recommend a transaction there. Oh, yes, Hannah.
So if you don't have the KYC filled out for the customer and they called you and ask what type of account should I do or what type of investment, would you have to say no, or would you say let's update your KYC and then I
Well,
can?
you can try and update it for sure, because you'd have to explain that before I can answer that. Find what's right for you. I need some information about you. So yeah, then you can try and update that information, and if it's forthcoming, then you can make recommendations. However, if it's not forthcoming, the closest thing you can probably recommend would be a money market fund, because a money market fund is designed to be a short-term parking place, right? When they're either in between investments or undecided or saving up for some goal within 2 years. That would be the closest thing you can do. Okay, sure thing, Anna. Thanks. Okay, firms also have to have an anti-money laundering program in place too. That's going to be handled, overseen by a specifically designated compliance officer. So the anti-money laundering programs will test what's the money laundering process, right? The three stages are placement, as they say, putting this illegally got money into the financial system. Layering, which is then moving money around, wiring it to again make it difficult to say where it came from, and then finally integration, taking the money laundering back into back into circulation, right, when it seems to come from legitimate sources. So the Bankruptcy Secrecy Act, right, says that you have to file the suspicious activities report within FinCEN if you see something, well, just doesn't look right. What kind of suspicious activity? Well, what would be suspicious? Could be any number of things here. So suspicious activities would be things like, some things we mentioned earlier, right? They seem unconcerned about risks, right? Unconcerned about fees or expenses, things that people normally would have been concerned about. They seem reluctant to talk about any type of sources, any type of destinations, right? Anything like that. All right, so FinCEN, so the suspicious activity report, yes, has to be filed within 30 days of the potential violation. And like I said, we said before, that sure sounds like a long time, but it's within 30 days. It doesn't have to be 30 days. All right, the currency transaction report, again, for any transactions that's $10,000 in a single transaction or a series of transactions that up to $10,000. All right, it has to be reported to FinCEN, again, within 15 days of that happening. The practice of structuring is taking a larger deposit and breaking up into smaller transactions, hopefully to try and, or at least they're trying to fly under the radar of the currency transaction report. So deposit 5,000 in the morning and 5,000 in the afternoon. Not only will you file a currency transaction report, but that sounds a little fishy, so we're going to file a suspicious activities report as well. All right, so the AML policy, anti-money laundering policy. So again, there's a compliance officer specifically devoted to anti-money laundering who'll come up with the firm's procedures, right? Part of their written manuals here, right? They're WSPs, they're written supervisory procedures. So first off, know your customer, right? To make reasonable risk determinations about them. Have a customer identification program, a CIP, right? That's the steps we use to find out that they are who they say they are. and also has to be tested, right? Their anti-money laundering part has to be independently tested. So a consultant will come in and try and basically stress test their anti-money laundering policy and see if they can't try and break their code. And if so, then they can recommend what changes can be made. We also have to train employees on how to be on the watch for suspicious activities or anti-money laundering. So our employees also have to be trained on this as well. All right, one of the regulations that has to do with opening accounts, customer accounts, is called Regulation SP. Regulation SP, which means Statement of Privacy. So firms have to have a privacy policy on what they'll do with customers' information. And that has to be given to customers when they open the account and also every year after that. So every year they'll have an insert along with their statements that will describe again what their privacy policy is. How do you handle customer information, particularly about disclosing personally identifiable information, PII. Now, if you've ever worked in financial services, that's probably come up. You've probably heard that more than once. Personally identifiable information is described as data that can be ascribed, can be attributed to a specific and identify that specific individual, or in conjunction with other information can identify a specific individual, be attributed to that one person. Now, some are obvious, like somebody's name, street address, driver's license number, email address, social security number, obviously. Okay, but just remember, it's either information by itself or in conjunction with other information, because trying to identity theft is sort of like putting together a jigsaw puzzle to figure out who somebody is, or being able to take that person's identity, or be able to use their information. Okay, so the privacy statement also has to let them know what they do with information and how they might share that information with other subsidiaries of the company or even non-affiliated third parties. They may share information, certain customer information, usually for cross-marketing purposes. So maybe like as a promotion from Quicken Loans or something, right? You get $100 off a new application for customers. Okay, people also have to know that they have the right to opt out of information sharing, right? So with non-affiliated third parties. Yes. So they have to know that people can say that they can opt out of that information. They don't want their information to be shared. Notice, however, it is an opt-out. It's not an opt-in. But here's the thing also, opting out has to be easy to do. You can do it with a phone call or check a box on a form or click a mouse to opt out. What would not be allowed, would be if they have to write a letter that says, I want you to opt out of information sharing, because that they really have to go out of their way to do. So it's got to be easy to them to opt out of information sharing. Now, Regulation T, let me just check the next slide to be sure here. Yeah, Regulation T makes a distinction between who's considered a customer and who is considered a consumer. A customer, okay, has an ongoing relationship with a financial firm, whereas a consumer, right, only uses services once. That has no ongoing relationship. Okay. So that's the difference. So a customer has to have a privacy statement when they open the account and every year after that. A consumer, since they don't have an ongoing relationship, they're basically one and done. They'll have a document also with the privacy statement, but don't have to do so again every year because basically they're one and done. I'll give you a real life example, but the firm I used to work for had a contract with AT&T because every year AT&T gave each employee like 5 shares of AT&T stock, and the employee could decide to hold or sell. Well, if they wanted to sell, they basically get this one-time single-use account, sell the shares, get a check sent to them. They would be considered consumers. They were one and done, right? Had no ongoing relationship with the firm. Okay. Now, trading authorization. So now, someone who's the account owner can give someone else authority to act on the account owner's behalf, giving that other person authority to get account information and do trades, and by granting someone else a power of attorney or POA. That would be often the abbreviation for it, POA. All right, now this does have to be in writing. So the account owner has to give written authorization for someone who's not on the account, to obtain account information or to place trades. And by the way, if that piece of paper, if that document has not been signed or received, that other person can't get account information. And if this hasn't happened to you yet, I'm sure it will. A man would call, always, right? And he wanted to do a trade in his wife's IRA. Now, IRAs are individual accounts, right? Now, there's no such thing as a joint IRA. And he wanted to place trade in her account. But she never filled out the power of attorney form that granted him accessibility to do so. Well, that's what I'd have to say. I'm sorry, I don't have the power of attorney form. I can't give you account information or place a trade. I'll mail you the forms you need, but until then, I can't do it. And by the way, they're not going to be happy with you. They're going to push back, saying, thinking that by virtue of the fact that they were married, that would be enough. Understandable, but afraid that's not actually the case. Must have the power of attorney form. Okay, now there's two levels of power of attorney. All right, there is the limited power of attorney. Okay, all right, see that is LPOA, limited power of attorney. Limited power of attorney can get account information and enter buy and sell orders. But someone with full power of attorney has the same ability as the account owner themselves. They can get account information, enter buy and sell orders, and either add or withdraw money or securities from the account, just like the account owner can themselves. Now, by the way, a power of attorney is valid as long as the account owner is alive and has full mental capacity. Should the account owner be incapacitated and can't act on their own behalf, a regular power of attorney won't do anymore. Now we have to have a durable power of attorney. Okay, this of course will survives incapacity. So the account owner can't act on their own behalf. Durable power of attorney is what's needed now. No power of attorney, by the way, survives the death of the customer. So when the customer passes away, all power of attorney is revoked. Now, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So my apologies. Okay. Now, when a customer gives power of attorney to their registered representative, allowing the registered representative to act on the customer's behalf, right? Including making trades, including even deciding what to buy or sell. That is called a discretionary account. In a discretionary account, the customer must give a written power of attorney, naming the registered rep as having power of attorney for the account. And basically what the customer is saying is just do what you need to do, take care of business. You don't have to call me with permission for every trade. Just go ahead and get it done. Okay, so that is a discretionary account. Now, trades that are done under discretionary account are going to come up to additional scrutiny. Right? So a manager, or supervisor, principal has to review at the end of every day any discretionary trades that have been entered, right, to make sure that they are suitable to that person and they're not doing things like churning the account, right, which is just excessive trading just to make commissions. Okay. All right, if we do not have discretionary authority for any transaction that the customer places, that we must get three things from an order. Okay, we're going to remember them as the 3 A's: the asset, which is the specific security they want to trade; the action, meaning buy or sell; and the amount, whether it's dollars or number of shares. As long as the customer provides all 3 of these things in an order, it is not considered discretionary. It does not need to be in writing. If the customer lets the registered rep choose any one or more of these 3 things in an order, that would be a discretionary order, and that does need to be in writing. And it has to be received in writing at the broker-dealer before they can use any type of discretion. The only thing they would leave out of that order is a price. They'll let their rep use their judgment when they think the price is right. In fact, they call it the price and time exception. Let me write that out, in fact. It's called the price and time exception. So they'll let their rep use their judgment when they think the price is right. So if a customer says something like, I want you to buy 200 shares of Altria Corp if you see the stock correct. Right? Correct means it makes this random downturn. Is given the asset, Altria Corp, the action, buy, and the amount, 200 shares. The only thing they left out of it was the price. They'll let their rep use their judgment when they think the price is right. This order is called a market not held order. And it gets that name because the firm is not held to price and time of execution. Right? If someone has just market order, they've got to execute that immediately. Well, this one that says they'll let their trading floor, maybe their flow brokers, see if they can work the order, see if they can maybe find a better price, or wait until they think that the price is right. Okay, so that's what that is now. Now, a not held order is only good for the day. It's a 1-day order. If the order is not fulfilled by the end of the day, the order is canceled. It has to be replaced the next day if they still want it. All right, what is not allowed in a discretionary account Oops, so sorry, just heard the ding here. Did someone have a question? Okay. Oh, here's a question that says, do reps automatically receive discretionary authority? No, it is not automatic at all. It must be done in writing, right, with a power of attorney form. Okay, great, Karina, thanks. Okay. All right, so what is not allowed in a discretionary account? Well, like I said, we got to make sure, right, everything is suitable to that customer. So when you have a discretionary account where the customer says, hey, you just do what you need to do, right? Well, you want to have a good long conversation with that customer to know what is right for them. What are they looking for? What do they need? So what might meet their goals. All right, so first off, churning, which is excessive trading just to make commissions. That is definitely a prohibited practice, right? And so the principal has to review discretionary accounts. First off, they describe it prior to opening the account, and all discretionary orders, right, have to be in writing and review them at regularly. First off, at the end of the day, and also they'll review the trading on a regular basis to look for patterns such as churning or excessive trading or recommending things that are not appropriate, not suitable to that customer. All right, now what if someone who works at another FINRA member firm wants to open an account at your firm? Or can you, working as a registered representative at a firm, can you open an account at another firm? Well, regulators say it's okay. Your employer may have a different opinion, and they probably do. All right, regulators say that before you can open an account at another firm, you must notify your employer in writing that you intend to do so, and you must get prior written consent, permission from your employer. Now, I'd say good luck getting it, but you must say do so. Okay. Now, when you open that other firm, so when you go to the other firm, you must notify that firm that you work for another FINRA member firm. Remember, I mentioned before, that's one of the things they ask on the new account form. Do you work for another FINRA member firm? If you say, yes, I do, then, well, that other firm will notify your employer that you opened an account with them. Now, your employer, right, your compliance department, has the right to be big brother, totally looking over your shoulder. They can request and will receive duplicate statements and trade confirmations. Right? So they can watch everything that you do at that other firm. They're making sure that you're not doing things that you shouldn't be doing, right? You're not trying to trade on the prohibited list or anything. Now, FINRA rules say the employer firm can request duplicate statements and confirmations. Excuse me. Trying to hit the mute switch on time and I couldn't. All right. That's FINRA rules. The MSRB rule, however, the MSRB says something different. MSRB says the firms must send duplicate confirmations and statement to the employer. FINRA says may, MSRB says must. This account does also apply to immediate family, so to relatives as well. Now, this does not apply to things like investment company shares, all right, like to a mutual fund, for example. You as an investor in a mutual fund, well, you have no control or even influence over what a fund manager is going to buy or sell. So there's no chance of you trying to get around doing things or do things you're not supposed to do if you're an investor in a mutual fund. So this rule doesn't apply. Question says, is this for licensed employees only? I believe it is for licensed employees, at least according to regulators anyway. Again, firms' policies may be different. Now, again, as a real life example, but the firm I used to work for would not allow any outside accounts unless it was for a product that my firm did not offer. So that would be the only exception there. Okay. Question says, why is it a concern for a firm employee to open an account at another firm? Well, I guess one of the reasons is because someone might be doing things or trying to do things that they're not allowed to do, right? Trading on the prohibited list, as an example, right? There may be a list of things that you're not allowed to place trades on. Maybe that your employer has some kind of deal with some kind of business dealings with another company. Well, in that case, you can't trade that other company's stock, or doing things like shadowing someone's account. Shadowing means that basically looking to see what someone else is doing and you do the same thing. Okay, right. Customer information is private and you can't use it for your own benefit. Okay, so I hope that helps answer that question. Okay. If it doesn't, again, always please let me know. Okay, great. All right, next section is suitability and account maintenance. All right, so let's check this out here. So First off, in suitability requirement, like I said, any recommendation has to be suitable to the person we make it to, which is why we ask such things as age, okay, and we ask their age because that also gives us a clue as to time horizon. How much time do they have, or how much when do they need their money, right? As an example is like the goal is saving for the kids' college fund, right? A college education. Are the kids in nursery school or in high school? That's an idea about time horizon. And the shorter their time horizon, that also tells us the safer we want to play it. We want to be more certain about the outcomes. We ask about age because that's also a clue as to their risk tolerance. Generally speaking, younger investors can afford to be more aggressive, presumably they have a longer time horizon. Older investors, or at least they're probably closer to their goal, want to be more stable, want to be more certain about their outcomes. Liquidity needs, right? This is how much cash do they have? If do they have an emergency fund, for example, just in case something comes up, right? Risk tolerance, right? So they'll ask for a self-assessment about how much risk do you feel you're able or willing to take. Like if your markets went down or your investments went down 10%, 20%, how would you react? Right? Would you panic and sell everything? Right? Would you just write it out? Would you double down and buy more? Okay. Those are things we need to know, again, because we want to make sure that it's right to the person you make it to. What tax bracket do they fall into? That will help us determine things like municipal bonds or traditional IRAs. Are they beneficial or not? Current and future needs and investment experience. Do they understand the investments? Do they understand how markets work? Do they understand the risks involved? Okay, like I said, this is requested information. They don't have to provide this information, but if they don't, we can only take unsolicited orders. By the way, sometimes a question comes up. What happens if you do know this stuff and your customer calls and makes an unsolicited order into something that you know is not suitable for your customer? Do you say anything? Do you say, oh no, this is not for you? What do you do? Okay, under FINRA says you should have the conversation. You can say, well, this is not the kind of thing you normally do. What's of interest to you about this one? Make sure they're not working under some misconceptions. But ultimately, if your customer says this is what I want to do, you will follow customer instructions. Follow customer's instructions ultimately. Also, you check the box on the order form, on the order ticket, that says it was an unsolicited order. That was your customer's idea, not your recommendations. So in case your compliance officer comes back and says, hey, did you recommend this to this person? You said, oh no, I checked the box. It was unsolicited. Oh, and by the way, Casey ever asked about this, but I figured this should be common sense stuff. Checking an order that says unsolicited when in fact it was solicited in a recommendation, yeah, that is a violation. But I figure you can probably guess that. Before making any recommendations, registered representatives are expected to do their homework, do their due diligence on 3 levels of suitability. Okay? The first level is called reasonable basis suitability. Reasonable basis means that before recommending, you have to know what it is you're recommending, right? Understand the product, right? And determine if it is at least suitable for at least some investors. It doesn't have to be suitable for everybody. Probably nothing is suitable for absolutely everybody, but it's got to have at least some investment merit, right? It's got to have something there. That's the first level. Once we're past that first level, then the next level is customer specific suitability. Now that means you have to know your customer well enough, right, to have that information about their goals, about their risk tolerance, about their time horizon, things like that, before you can make that recommendation. Is it the right fit for that person? Then the third level is quantitative suitability. Quantities means numbers, so that it is whether the size of making a recommendation compared to a customer's assets or the frequency of making buy and sell recommendations is not excessive and unsuitable to that person. In fact, there's a word for it. What do they call recommending trading, which is excessive and unsuitable? What's the word for it? Do you remember? Who knows? Who knows this one? Anyone? Enter it or unmute? Yeah, there we go, Karina. Exactly. That is known as churning. Right. Excessive trading just to make commissions. Or another word for that is twisting. I rarely see it, but I have at least once or twice. Okay. Right. And that, of course, is an unethical, right, unacceptable business practice. I saw a Dilbert cartoon, and Dilbert goes to his financial planner, and the planner says, we turn all your worthless equity into valuable transaction fees. Right? That is churning. Okay. Now, of course, that's for that specific person. How do you know if it's churning for that individual? That's why we have our supervisors here to make that they make that determination. But figure this way: most people are buy and hold investors, so their level of churning, excessive trading, is probably quite a low threshold. Okay, yeah, I know some people are day traders, right? They probably don't have it, probably don't even have a threshold. Okay, regulation BI or best interest. This is actually a rather new requirement here. This came into effect in 2020. This says that broker dealers always have to put put their customers' best interest ahead of their own, right? Right, and minimize and disclose any kind of conflict of interest. Now, see, FINRA has a suitability standard. Any recommendation must be suitable to the person you recommend it to. But a best interest standard, which is also a fiduciary standard, is a cut above that. That's a higher level. Investment advisors, for example, are fiduciaries who have to maintain, right? Always put their customers' interests ahead of their own at all times. Now, what could this look like? Under a suitability standard, a registered rep should say, should I recommend the ABC balance fund, which pays me a 3% commission? Or should I recommend the XYZ balance fund, which pays me a 4% commission? I recommend the XYZ balance fund. Okay. All right. Now, those are both suitable investments. So under a suitability standard, they'd both be fine. Under a fiduciary or best interest standard, no, they must reserve, right? They'd recommend the ABC fund. Why? Because look, who ultimately pays those commissions, right? It's the customers who pay those commissions out of fees and expenses that the fund charges. So knowing that, that's the customer's best interest to recommend the ABC fund. Now, this applies to retail investors, not institutional. As always, I think you'll find that institutional investors get a lot of exemptions to the rules. Regulators figure that financial institutions are professionals and they can take care of themselves. They want to make sure that retail investors, that's what they call the general public, who's not always too terribly sophisticated, who really relies on the expertise of a registered representative, right? Well, that person better be looking out for that person's best interest. Okay. All right. So recommendations are for personal investing. And there was a question that came up before class today, because apparently there was a test question that says, well, someone has a business account as well as a personal account, and the rep was making recommendations to the business account. As it turns out, regulation BI did not apply to this. I would have thought I would have got that answer wrong, by the way. I would have figured that, well, it's a business account, but it's not a financial institution, right? The financial institution is a business of handling money. Other than that, they're still considered retail. Well, it turns out I would have been wrong. Okay. Yeah, this is for personal investing, not for business investing. Okay, now regulation BI consists of 4 obligations, right? 4 obligations for broker dealers. And they have to meet these 4 obligations under what's called a customer relationship summary, or Form CRS. Basically, it's a 2-page document that describes the relationship or the nature of the business between the customer and the broker dealer. And it comes in this question and answer format. So it's to make it very simple, very easy to read. Disclosure obligation: disclose fees, services, and limits to services. The care obligation, right? Always use reasonable basis, these suitability concerns, and to do reasonable care and methodology in ensuring that any recommendation is suitable to that person. Conflict of interest obligation: look for, eliminate, or if you can't eliminate, at least reduce the possible disclosure of conflict, and always identify them, always disclose them. I think also you'll find that a good general rule. If there's a potential conflict of interest, it needs to be disclosed. And as long as it is disclosed and people can make informed decisions, regulators seem to be, okay with it. Okay. When they hide information, that's where regulators have a problem. Compliance obligation, right? That broker dealers have to have rules and practices in place and written procedures on how to be in compliance with regulation BI. So the Form CRS, as I mentioned, right, is a summary document, and customers receive it when they, they say at the beginning of the relationship. Now that would mean when they open the account, but they would also be, if they had an existing account, if they get any advice or make any recommendations to them, also provide Form CRS. What does it include? Fees and costs, counts of interest, standards, all these things that have to be there, but also there'll be a link back to Broker Check. Broker Check is FINRA's service that people can use to look up information about the firm or about the registered representative, about the employee of that firm, and find out things like what licenses they hold, in what states they're registered, in what firms are they were, their last 10 years of employment history in the industry, right, with broker dealer firms. And if there is any disciplinary record, that will also show up on brokerage check. So, yeah, if you've been censured by FINRA, for example, yeah, it's going to be on your record on brokerage check. I looked myself up on brokerage check, and I'm happy to say I've got a clean record. Okay, changes. If there are changes in Form CRS or anything in this customer relationship summary, all right, they're going to get an updated Form CRS within 60 days. Okay. Before we go on and talk about customer orders, let's go ahead and take another quick break here because we're right at the top of the hour, so not a bad time to take a break and return at 13 past the hour. Okay, and during our break, as always, if you'd like me to go back to an earlier slide, or if you want me to go, if you have a question you want to review, please feel free to either type it in the chat or unmute and ask aloud, and then I'll reply appropriately. And on that, I'll see you in just a few. And we're still connected, right? Right, back from break. All right, thank you everyone for your thumbs up, your digital thumbs up. All right, so let's move on to our, okay. All right, so here we're talking about account maintenance. All right, first off, how to place customer orders. Customer orders have to be done still the old-fashioned way, either in person or on the phone. Okay. Calls, if done to a call center, yes, they'll be asked to verify their identity. So they'll ask questions like, I don't know, if you have, sometimes people set a password to their account. They can ask things like, what were your last transactions? Things like that. Okay, so that would be confirmed. Okay, if you're going to, you can place orders online. You can place orders online because they have a password-protected account, so they verify who that they are. They'll enter their user ID and password. We cannot take orders by text, fax, email, Twitter, or sorry, X, okay, where we can't actually verify that the person's who does it. Trade confirmations. Every customer gets, every time they do a trade, they get a trade confirmation the day after. So that's a written confirmation. I mean, they can be emailed now, but it's basically a one-sheet document that's got all the details of that transaction, and people use that. They'll keep that for their records, right? Especially when they want to count, if you bought something, well, and you sold it again, do you show profit or loss? More than that, the confirmation really is like their evidence. It's like the receipt of the trade, right? If you if you bought a stereo and you have a problem with it, they're going to want to see your receipt, right? So if you have a problem with your trade, they're going to want to see the trade confirmation. Most people don't receive, right, paper stock certificates with their names on anymore. So the confirmation that's mailed to them is their evidence that the trade went through. Now, what if that confirmation has a mistake in it? That can happen, but if there is, have to send a corrected confirmation, right? Enough of that. Now, what if the confirmation was correct, but the trade was in error, right? Someone put in, I don't know, customer says, I want you to buy it at $50, but the rep put in $55, something like that, okay? Well, then they'll go back and they'll look at the trade, which is why, the firm I used to work for, all calls would be, right, tape recorded or digitally recorded. So if there was a dispute, they'll go back to the call. And so if there's an error in execution, yes, it is their firm's responsibility. So they may have to eat that error in confirmation, right? That mistake. So it might cost them. Okay. But if the confirmation was an error, right? So that but the trade actually happened at the right price. The confirmation reported the incorrect price. It is the trade that takes priority. The confirmation that was an error is the actual trade that takes place. All right. Now we also have to send customer statements, right? A statement is also a document that's got the most updated and recent information about the account, including the account balances, a free credit balance. By the way, I'm going to write that down because sometimes they ask about that. A free credit balance is how much cash is in the account available to withdraw. That's known as free credit. So that has to be stated, right, with every statement. It will have the value of the overall account balances. It will have the value of each and every investment, every position in that account, and account transaction history, right? Every transaction, buy, sell, deposit, withdrawal, interest paid, interest earned, whatever, right? Okay. Every transaction and the date of it since the last statement was generated. Customer statements must be sent on a minimum quarterly basis or monthly if they're active accounts. So it's monthly for active accounts, quarterly for inactive accounts. There is another rule, and I'll mention this, okay. Accounts holding penny stocks must be sent quarterly. I'm sorry, not quarterly, monthly. Remember a definition what a penny stock is? It's an unlisted security, which means it's not on a stock exchange. It trades over the counter. That's under $5 a share. Now, those stocks can be very volatile. First off, even a small change in the price ends up being a big percentage of the value, and they trade rather infrequently. So it's a thin market for them. So that's why we have to have much more frequent information about them. Now, of course, our statements and trade confirmations will be sent through the mail. Yes, you can request email now. In fact, they keep requesting me to send it by email because they want to save paper and stuff. All right, but people, if they don't, customers can request a hold on their mail, like if they're traveling or something, and they don't want their statements, piling up inside the mailbox. So they can request a hold for up to 3 months. The request can longer than 3 months, but then they have to make a written request, and there has to be a significant or substantial reason for making that request. Convenience is not a significant reason. All right, customers must also be given notice about the broker-dealer firm's business continuity plan. That's their emergency plan, how to deal with interruptions of services, right? Because something happens, right? And what happens? How will they get back up and running as quickly as possible? For example, what if there's a blackout, right? There's no power. How will they get back up and running, right? Will they have alternate locations? What if they can't get to their office because of what if there's a fire? If there's a flood, if there's a hurricane, a tornado, a hailstorm, okay, meteor strike, alien invasion, zombie apocalypse, Death Star. How will they get back up and running as quickly as possible? That's the business continuity plan, and customers receive that or have the ability to see that. And all right, glad you like that, Hannah. Thanks. Okay. So you can also get they can download the BCP, but or just a summary disclosure of one. They do not need to file their business continuity plan with FINRA, by the way, but FINRA must be given names and phone numbers of minimum of 2 principals at the firm. All right, what happens if someone now leaves the firm, right? They're retired or they've gone to another place. Then the accounts that they had at the firm, now remember, it's the firm's customers, right? So the other firms will be given to another rep at the same firm. And if they say, no, I want to work with this guy, and now he's working at, he's no longer at ABC, but now he works at XYZ, well, then they'll have to follow him over to XYZ and fill out a transfer of request form, transfer accounts. Okay. Okay, thanks for that. Okay. All right, so when they do a transfer of accounts, okay, to transfer accounts from one firm to the other, let me write this. So they fill out the transfer initiation form, a TIF. You always fill out the paperwork of the firm that it's going to, right, where you're transferring to. So, and the customer will fill out the name, all the details of the account we're transferring from, and a list of the assets that they wish to transfer. All right, and the firm receives that. Actually, let me just check real quick if they don't have that already in there. All right, no, they don't seem to. So, okay. So the place where it's going to, has to go to the place where it's coming from. That firm, what they call the carrying firm, the one that's currently carrying the customer's assets, has 1 business day to validate the request and to validate the positions, or to take exception, which means that for some reason they can't complete the transfer. Maybe the assets they requested aren't there. Okay. Then once they validate, they got 3 business days to complete the transfer. That comes under the ACATS system. I'm not sure if there was a slide about it, so I'll mention it here just in case. ACATS, okay, which stands for Automated Customer Account Transfer Service. All right, and FINRA requires firms to use the ACATS system, because if they didn't, then firms are going to drag their feet on sending their customers' account assets to a competitor. Proxies, okay. Most of as a shareholder, right, as an owner of stocks, you're a part owner of the corporation, and you get to vote on certain things, right? So some things come to a shareholder vote. The vote is handled at the annual shareholder meeting, but not everybody can make it to the meeting. So most of the voting is done by proxy. Think of that as an absentee ballot. So every once in a while, I get something in the mail every once in a while, in which I have to, to talk about the things that are to be voted on, right? Are there who's up for to be elected to the board of directors? Are there certain shareholder initiatives that are being requested, or is a amendment to the company's corporate charter, right? Its bylaws. So that has to come up for a shareholder vote, and I get something in the mail, And basically, I check the box that says vote for, vote against, or abstain, and then I mail it back, and my vote is counted at the actual meeting. As long as it gets there on time. So those are things that can be voted for. Now, since most people keep their investments in their accounts, right, they don't have paper stock certificates with their name on it. So the transfer agent, remember that's who keeps the list of shareholders, right? Who owns how many shares, is also responsible for shareholder mailing. And if they don't have the paper certificates with their names, they don't know who the shareholder is. They instead only show with the broker dealer where it's located, right? That means they're held in street name. Okay, when they're held in street name. Right? That means the broker dealer holds it, so the transfer agent just sees that these shares are held at the broker dealer. So any mailing material, annual reports, and proxies are sent to the broker dealer firm, who then forwards that information to their customer because the broker dealer knows who the customer is. So when I get them in the mail, right, the return envelope is with the broker dealer's address on it, not the employer's not the firm's address. By the way, firms are not allowed to charge customers for forwarding their annual reports or proxy material to them. They are, however, allowed to charge the corporation for doing their postage and mailing for them. All right, there are some things that are that FINRA is concerned about, especially with regard to senior citizens. By the way, senior citizens is defined as age 65 and above. So first off is that reps have to understand the products they're being recommended. I say you have to actually tell people that. Well, yeah, you did, because people were like pitching stuff that they didn't even know what they were pitching. And there are some things that is going to get let's say, raise an eyebrow from a compliance officer when they're offered or being recommended to senior citizens. Now, remember, they're not necessarily unsuitable, but they could certainly be, and certainly they're going to look at that maybe with a little extra scrutiny. Like, for example, recommending a variable annuity or equity index annuity, where instead of getting a guaranteed rate of return from the insurance company, right, which is safe and stable, but in this case, it's the policy owner who picks the investments, hoping, of course, that the investments will outperform the rate of return. Okay, well, if so, right, they usually need some time to do so. In the long run, that's quite possible. But for someone who's like a retiree or close to it, they're probably better suited with a fixed annuity so they know exactly how much they can count on. So that's going to raise an eyebrow. Recommending things like limited partnership shares or direct participation programs, right? That's what they mean by that, right? Limited partnerships and direct participation programs, DPPs, because they are they're high risk investments and they're highly illiquid, which means they're very, very difficult, if not impossible, to sell. If you're in one, you pretty much have to be expected to be in it for the duration. So for someone who may be a retiree and may need access to those funds, again, that'd be very much a concern. Variable life settlements. So if you have a variable life insurance, again, that's where the policy owner picks the investments. How will they be settled to, should in terms of the living benefit of the cash value of the policy. Recommending structured products, again, because those things are illiquid, generally speaking. They're very difficult to sell, and they're quite complicated, and also have more risk to them than they might think. Things like a equity index CD, for example. People are kind of used to thinking CDs. Well, you just right, you get a higher rate of return if you keep it at the bank a long time, but it's a guaranteed rate of return. An equity linked CD is more tied to its rate of return is going to be tied to like a stock market index. Well, those get more complicated, and people should know about it. All right, in case a test question ever comes up that says that you should recommend that a customer gets a second mortgage, right, to make this investment, is never the right answer. Never the right answer, because first off, they'd have to pay interest on that mortgage, and if the investments really if they crash and burn, well, not only have they just lost their investments, they've just lost their house too. Okay. Using retirement funds to invest in risky securities. Okay, but these are pretty much common sense stuff. But remember, of course, that does not necessarily apply to everybody. All right, it wouldn't apply to Warren Buffett. Okay, he's over age 65, but he's a more sophisticated investor. So always take it as in the idea that it doesn't apply to everybody, but in general, it's certainly a concern. All right, using unofficial certifications or designations like certified senior advisor or retirement specialist. Why? Because there is no such thing as a certified senior advisor. There is no certification board that defines that. Oh, question is, can I define an annuity? All right, coming back to this one. An annuity is a contract with a life insurance company. Normally, think life insurance pays when somebody dies, but annuities are a lifetime benefit. They pay for as long as somebody lives. Someone will set up put money into an annuity. They will hold it at the insurance company. There are some tax advantages for that. The insurance company then guarantees it will distribute that money over a period of time over the life of the contract. In fact, if you notice, the word annuity has the same root as the word annual, right? So it's going to be paid over a period of time. The life of the contract is basically the life of the person. So an annuity is going to offer a guaranteed lifetime income. No matter how long somebody lives, even if their annuity runs out of money, the insurance company guarantees lifetime income. That is the purpose of the annuity. Income that you cannot outlive. Is it with interest? Yes, it is. Because if they have money on deposit, they're going to get some rate of return on that money. In a fixed annuity, they get a guaranteed minimum return from the insurance company, which is very safe. The insurance company guarantees it, but it doesn't pay all that well. Only safe but low paying kind of things. But the payment that they receive out of it, once they start taking money out of it, withdrawing over time, is going to be a fixed dollar amount. If the policyholder wants to get a higher rate of return and is willing to take the investment risk, then they could choose a variable annuity. Now the policyholder picks the investments, not a guaranteed rate anymore, right? So there's no guarantees from the insurance company about the rate of return. It all depends on how well their investments do. And if those investments, do better than expected or worse than expected, the payment that someone receives as a variable annuity can fluctuate. If the investments do better than expected, the next payment goes up, increases. But if it is worse than expected, then the payments go down. So not everybody likes that. Some people want to know exactly what they can count on. So a senior, right, or a retiree probably wants to know that they can count on because they're dependent on that for income. All right, high pressure free lunch seminars. Okay, no problem with free lunch seminars. I've attended a number of free lunch seminars just for the purpose of getting a free lunch. I've been a professional dinner eater. Okay, right, look, if I get something, I get a postcard in the mail that says we'll buy you lunch at Maggiano's. It's kind of hard to turn that down, honestly. Okay, but you have to, but you got the presentation, right? And of course they will invite you to learn more, right? To make an appointment. They don't have a problem with that. It's the high pressure stuff, the one where they sit down at the table with you and says, "Hey, we just bought you an expensive lunch here. The least you can do is make an appointment with us." Okay, that's the thing they don't like. And of course, I wish there was a more polite way to put this, but we may have customers who are suffering under the effects of Alzheimer's or dementia, and makes them, makes it difficult for them to look out for their own best interest. Originally, FINRA called it, was concerned financial exploitation of senior citizens, but then they realized it's not necessarily just seniors who may have some mental or physical difficulty that makes it impairment that makes it hard for them to look out for their own best interest. So if we find a customer who may have, let's say, appears to be out of it, okay, we have to notify our supervisor right away. And we also have to have a designated individual. We should also get the name and phone number of a trusted contact person. There it is, a trusted contact person. So we're going to ask them to make a real attempt to receive a trusted contact person. Someone, family member, a friend, a lawyer, an accountant, someone we can contact in case of whatever. Okay, whatever it may be. Okay. Now again, we make our reasonable attempt to do so. If we have requested, can you provide a name and phone number, and they don't give us one, we've done what we can do. We've made our reasonable attempt. Now, we are concerned about financial exploitation of seniors. All right, and that's things like fraud, intimidation, account retitling, or account theft. If we have cause to suspect some sort of financial exploitation, the firm can put a 15 business day hold on distributions. Okay, that's like 3 weeks. So they can hold any distributions for up to for 15 business days or 3 weeks. If we find that investigate and it seems to be fraudulent, they can additionally hold that for another 10 business days for 25 business days total. That's 5 weeks. And if there's a government or law enforcement investigation, we can add another 30 business days on top of that for a total of 55 business days. Now, these restrictions, by the way, that these holds only are on distributions, right? On sending checks out of the account. We will also, if a hold is placed on the account, document the reasons for doing so, right? Because let's face it, it's not something you normally do. So it's burden of proof kind of falls on the company. And we have to notice the trusted contact person. However, if it's the trusted contact person we're worried about, maybe shouldn't be as trusted as we thought, then of course we're not actually going to try to contact them. We're going to try and contact someone else. All right, well that's our report here about account and suitability. So I hope that kind of helps you out a little bit. Is there any part of that again that seems maybe you just need a little more help with, a little more detail? Like the part about the annuity, for example. I hope that helped you out a little. Okay. Yeah, that's what annuity is, right? Lifetime income. Because people are concerned, what happens if I live longer than my money? Okay. That's what annuities address. Lifetime income. Even if the account runs out of money. Because the insurance company knows, right? Some people live longer, some people not as long. They have a pretty fair idea how it averages out. All right, with our next step, let's go to our next section here about other types of accounts. Actually, let me see. We're about 30 minutes past the hour right now, so we should get through this section today. I think it's okay. If it's all right with you, let's see if we can pull up another Kahoot here, because I think we can get through them all. So let me go ahead and pause this. Okay, and do a screen share again. Okay, hold on a second. So I'm having a little trouble with my my monitor here. Truth is, I kind of broke it, and so there we go. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's get our pin here. All right, and our game pin is 478-4044. Turn the volume down a little bit while waiting. Okay, that's 5 and 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. There we go. All right, there's all set. All right, let's begin. Let's play Family Feud. Sorry. Okay, question 1. All the following will be considered part of the general standards for all communication with the public except A. Statements that past performance is a good indication of future results. B. Balanced statements regarding risk and reward. C. Consideration for the nature of the audience receiving the communication. Or D. No omission of material facts. All right. Hi, Amy. Just made it. Okay. Okay, good. Good. We're doing the Kahoot thing right now, so you should see, if you want to join in, you see the pin on the screen. Okay. All the following are considered part of general standards for communication, except, right? What means, again, we have 3 truths and a lie. The one that's the lie here, statements that past performance is a good indication of future results, is nothing you'll ever hear him say, right? Past performance does not guarantee future results. That is the kind of disclaimer you're likely to see. Well, first off, because it's true. Just because it worked out before doesn't mean it's going to work out now. Okay. So that's always the case. Yes, we must have balanced statements, right? Risk and reward. Okay, we have to basically confirm all details, right? What's important. And communication should be the nature of the person receiving. That's why we categorize as retail communication for the general public and institutional communication, which is for a professional audience. And of course, you do not omit material information. You cannot hide information. Okay. Remember, according to regulators, hiding the truth is no different than lying about the truth. All right, it's Alexis who put some points on the board. That's our next one. Which of the following is a non-financial investment consideration? A, the customer's total credit card debt. B, the amount of the customer's monthly income available for investment. C, the customer's net worth excluding his home and property. Or D, the customer's place of employment and status. There it is. Yes, did great. Right. Non-financial investment consideration. Oh, it's definitely a consideration. It's just not a financial one. So place of employment and status. Status meaning full-time, part-time, contractor, unemployed, in between, retired, those other things. Okay, or in transition. That's what we used to call, right? In transition. All right, lots of people put some points on the board now. Let's check our next one. Recommendations regarding investment strategies under the Know Your Customer rule would not apply to recommendations to A. Buy, hold, or sell common stock. B. Make equity purchases in a particular market sector. C. Buy or sell commodities. Or D. Make purchases and sales intraday, day trading. Okay, very good. I know this was a little difficult one because, well, you might not have heard much about buy or sell commodities after all, but this is a test about securities. Okay, so these are securities recommendations, and commodities are not securities. Therefore, this rule does not apply. Different rules might apply, but just not this particular one. Yeah, all the others, right, do have to do with know your customer, including day trading. Okay, all right. Alexis is 3 in a row, and Ashley just moved up some serious points here. When discussing investing with your client, all the following will be considered recommendations except A. Suggesting a particular investment strategy. B. Discussing the pros and cons of traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs. C. Advising on the benefits of day trading. Or B. Suggesting the market sector. Hey, you did great. Okay. All of them we consider recommendations except, right, traditional or Roth IRAs, because they're not really, it's not really an investment recommendation. It's a matter of accounts, it's a matter of taxes, again, which can be important stuff, but is not considered a recommendation. Good. Let's see who we've done here. Okay, Alexis is 4 in a row, and Hannah moved up some points on the board here. Which of the following would not require heightened suitability requirements before recommending to your clients? A. A utilities mutual fund. B. An exchange traded note. C. An oil and gas limited partnership. Or D. A hedge fund. Well, would not require heightened suitability. This is another negative question where you see not or except. So we got to pick out the false answer choice. I know it's sometimes a little hard to remember that you need to find false when you're so accustomed for looking for the true answer. A utilities mutual fund would not be an issue because, well, it is a sector fund, right, in a particular industry. Utilities is a more, let's say, conservative sector than other sectors. Okay, like like the electric companies and stuff. And being in a mutual fund, right, gives you already broad diversification. What we do want to know about heightened suitability for things that are particularly high risk or particularly complicated investments or highly illiquid investments, which are difficult to sell out of. Exchange traded notes would be because they're a complicated investment. The interest rate that an ETN pays is going to be tied to a market index, so it's a structured product, which is quite complicated sometimes, and not something that newbies might have a hard time with. Okay, limited partnership shares are extremely illiquid. So that means you have to be basically have the means to be able to be in it for the duration. You probably can't cash out of it. Hedge funds also are structured as limited partnerships, also make them highly illiquid investments and very complicated. So and they should be for sophisticated investors. All right, Karina moving up a couple points here. An active trader wants to invest in a managed equity portfolio that can trade intraday. What do you recommend? A closed-end fund. B, a mutual fund. C, an exchange. Or D, Yeah, good. Okay. A managed equity portfolio that can trade intraday. So now this one was difficult. This one was tricky because there's a couple things going on. You might have said, well, what about an exchange traded fund? Those can trade intraday. They sure can, except for one thing. They're a passively managed equity portfolio, not actively managed. Right? So there were two things: managed equity portfolio and can trade intraday. That would describe a closed-end fund. Closed-end funds are actively managed. It means the fund manager makes the day-to-day buy and sell decisions. Exchange-traded funds are passively managed, which means their whole goal is to match and mirror a particular market index. Mutual funds do not trade intraday. They only are bought and sold once a day at the end of the day. And of course, they're also actively managed usually. An exchange-traded note is not an equity portfolio. It is a debt. It is a bond. Let's see how we did here. Okay, Ashley's taking the lead, and Karina is 3 in a row. Under the KYC rule, a registered representative would be required to gather information on all the following except: A, the customer's financial and non-financial investment considerations. B, all of the essential facts about the customer related to the investment. C, if the customer is graduated from college. Or D, what the customer's objectives. Perfect. Everybody aced this one. I thought you would. Okay. Yes. Okay. Again, all the following except, right? Which is the one we do not need. We do not need to know if they graduated from college. Okay. All right, that'd be fine and everything. Know what their alma mater is, but no, it's not needed to know because it's not really so much a financial concern. Karina's 4 in a row, and Colby moves up a couple places here. All right, last one, I believe. The term investment strategy applies to all the following except: A, the customer's investment goals. B, the customer's preference in bond investments. C, how much the customer may reasonably invest. D, the customer's position in real estate. Okay, great job. Right. The customer's position in real estate is not one of our investment strategies here because of, well, this is investing in securities, and real estate is not a security. Now, now a real estate investment trust is a security, but it basically represents a real estate portfolio. Okay. All right, how do we do here? All right, third place, bronze medal, is Colby. All right, in second place, silver medalist is Ashley. And in first place, gold medal and Olympic champion is Alexis. Awesome. Okay. Hey, great job with yours. Applause. Okay. And horns, graffiti, and confetti. All right. Nice work, everyone. Thanks so much. All right, let's go ahead and close this one out. All right. So our next section here is about other types of accounts. So let's start here with our first part of account. Here has to do with margin accounts. Margin accounts. All right. Margin refers to the extension of credit, which allows a customer to borrow against the value of their portfolio if they want to. They don't have to, but it allows them to. Now, they can use that either like a revolving line of credit, basically borrow cash against the value of their portfolio, but more likely they use it to. Sorry. Amy says we're all studying with Alexis. Yeah, that's great. Okay. Okay. How do we know it's referring to securities? Okay. Well, partly because, to come back to that, how do you know if they're referring to securities? Okay. The definition of a security is actually a legal definition, is actually rather vague. And they do that deliberately so someone doesn't take it like right up to the edge of the letter of the law to see how much they can get away with. The best description I can give you for a security, let me write this out for you, in fact. Okay. It's something known as the Howey test. It was a Supreme Court case, SEC versus W.J. Howey. And it was like 1946, I think. So the Supreme Court defines as an investment contract, that means a security, as having these characteristics. I, for investment of money. C, into a common enterprise. That means a bunch of people are working for one thing. And E, to reasonably expect a profit due to a third party's efforts. Okay, basically profiting from putting money into something and getting a profit due to somebody else's work. Like if you're an investor in Starbucks, for example, right? You don't have to pour coffee to profit as an investor in Starbucks. You're profiting from other people pouring coffee, okay? Because you invested and put your money into Starbucks, this common enterprise. So under that description, it sort of sounds like just about anything could be considered a security. So it's a lot easier to talk about what is not a security. So what is not a security is traditional insurance or fixed insurance. That is not a security. It's a contract with an insurance company. A variable, however, variable insurance or variable annuities, if it's got the word variable in it, it's both insurance and investments. So that is considered a security. Commodities, which are things that are bought and sold in bulk, like gold, wheat, lumber, crude oil, sugar, pork bellies, frozen concentrated orange juice. Right? Those are not considered securities. Neither are commodities futures contracts. That's a contract to deliver a commodity at a future date at a fixed price, basically locking your price now for delivery later. Currencies, which are yen and euros and pounds and Canadian dollars and pesos, right, are not securities. Okay, so that's the thing. What is not a security? Now, real estate, or at least your own real estate, is not a security, or a condo you live in, or even you rent out, is not a security. If you rent it out, right, you're profiting based on your own efforts. If you've got a timeshare, however, a timeshare could be a security. Right, it costs money to buy a timeshare. There's a common enterprise because more than one person uses a timeshare, and you do expect a profit from someone else's efforts, right, from the timeshare company that leases out to you. So, okay, that's the definition of what a security is. I know it's a little okay. Okay. Oh, Alexis would like to have a study group. Okay, great. Okay. Hey, feel free to contact each other. I don't think I'm not sure if I can give you like each other's email and stuff like that. I think that's considered confidential. That's why I blind carbon copy all the emails. But if you want to settle with each other, all good. Okay. So you want to put your email you put in there into put in the chat if you want to. Okay. All right. So coming back from the tangent, a margin account, okay, is extension of credit, and people can use them often to leverage their investments. So basically, they can just make an investment and just put down, instead of paying for their trade in full, just make the minimum required deposit, like the minimum down payment, and they can borrow the balance from the broker dealer, and that gives them leverage on their investments, make their money work even harder for them. Okay, but they can also work just as hard against you too. So it increases the level of potential return, but also increases the risk. Okay, to open a margin account, remember we said before, for a cash account, a customer signature is not required, at least not according to regulators. A margin account, however, does. Now, because margin is borrowing against the value of the account, and there are three things in the margin account well, two of them are required, one is optional. The credit agreement is required. The credit agreement says if I borrow money against the value of my account, I promise to pay it back with interest. We really do need a signature on that one. The hypothecation agreement, to hypothecate, that means pledge. I know, right? So your Harvard MBA word of the day. Oops. It means to pledge their investments as collateral for that loan, which also allows the broker-dealer to sell those securities in case the customer defaults on the loan. There's also another one called the loan consent agreement. Now, this one is optional, at least again, according to regulators. Firms may require it, but the regulators don't. This loan consent agreement says, I will allow the broker-dealer to use the securities that I hold in a margin account and allow them to lend those securities to other investors for use in short sales. Now, remember, when someone sells a stock short, they sell something they don't have by borrowing securities from their broker-dealer. Where does the broker-dealer get the securities to lend to the customer? They get it from their other customers who hold them in their margin accounts. And they lend them securities from their customers' accounts to somebody else to sell them short. Now, in case you're wondering, that customer who lent those securities, they don't know what's happening. It's entirely invisible to them, and they're not inconvenienced in any way, shape, or form. They can sell their stocks whenever they want to, and they'll still collect their dividends. So they don't know about it, and it's not affect them in any way. All right. Now, by the way, we talked about having a cash account and a margin account. So let me describe that. Now, they're not actually like separate account numbers. They won't come in like separate envelopes with different, this is one account, this is a different account. No, they're all under one single account. So I think of them as sub accounts under one single account number. The cash account holds the investments that must be paid in full, in cash. Right? Then it cannot have any. They're not marginable. That means they're not approved as loan collateral or have any loan value. Those could be things like very low price securities, for example. They won't lend against their value. The margin account holds those assets that are marginable, that can be used to finance a line of credit if somebody wants to do so. Okay, and they hold the accounts of the investments that are marginable and can borrow against their value. So when I was working as a rep, I would describe it to customers like saying, well, it's like you have two different pockets, right? You've got money in your left pocket, that is your cash account that has to be paid in full. You've got money in your right pocket, that's your margin account where you can borrow against its value if you want to. They're two different, right? They're different pockets, but it's the same pair of pants, right? They're all under one single account number, and assets can sometimes transfer from one pocket to the other. Anyway, that's how I used to describe it to people, and that metaphor seemed to work at least most of the time. Okay, so yeah, I just think of the sub accounts under one single account number. Now, the regulation that oversees margin, right, extension of credit, is under this Regulation T of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. Regulation T basically allows the Federal Reserve to set the minimum maintenance margin requirement, or the minimum deposit, which is currently set at 50%. Okay, so Regulation T says if you want to buy something on margin, you have to make at least a 50% deposit. You buy $10,000 worth of investments, you have to deposit $5,000. You can borrow the other 50% from your broker dealer, right, which they'll pay back plus interest, right, usually when they sell their securities. Why do they do this? Because of the leverage it gives you, right? They basically using other people's money to invest with. So with that, if you only put 50% down, if the stock goes up 5%, you're going to show a 10% return on your money. But on the other hand, if you bought them on 50% margin and the stock goes down 5%, you're going to show a 10% loss. Now, this rule does not only applies to non-exempt securities, right? The words that are securities that are not exempt from registering with the SEC, and most securities are. So exempt securities this doesn't apply to, right? And exempt securities includes government bonds, municipal bonds, commercial paper, and the like. Okay, now the Federal Reserve sets the initial margin requirement, like the down payment. After that, then the account has to maintain a certain level, a certain ratio, a debt to equity ratio. That's called maintenance margin. So the equity, right, has to be level at a certain level of equity. So FINRA can set the minimum maintenance requirement where it has to stay at. So if those investments go down, they can only go down so far before debt to equity becomes unsustainable. So FINRA sets the maintenance requirements, not the Federal Reserve. That's why there are two margin requirements. All right, so broker dealers, okay, so basically the initial requirement is 50% deposit. Basically, it gets a little more complicated. But again, so that means to buy $10,000 worth of stocks, you got to deposit $5,000 cash. Okay. Now, in a short sale, now remember that's when someone borrows securities, right? In a long purchase, they borrow cash to finance the investments. In a short sale, they borrow securities. But they also have to meet the minimum Regulation T requirement, which is a 50% requirement. So they have to deposit 50% over and above the proceeds of the short sale. So if they short $10,000 worth of stock, they've got to deposit $5,000 over and on top of that. Now, what securities are considered marginable? Most things are. If it's listed on a stock exchange, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, American Stock Exchange, most likely marginable. Government bonds, because they're very safe and stable, also have a margin loan available to them. So do investment grade bonds. That's top tier credit quality, right? BBB rated and higher. Over the counter stocks can be marginable if they've been approved by the Federal Reserve. They said that we'll accept this as loan collateral. If they're not accepted as loan collateral, they cannot be bought on margin and therefore held in the cash account, not in the margin account. Other things that are not marginable, there is a rule that newly issued securities, like an IPO, is not considered marginable for the first 30 days. Now, one reason for that is because when a company just starts trading, it usually is very volatile, right? It goes up and down a lot as it just is issued, right? Up big, down big, up big, down big. If you ever see a ship, for example, that comes out of its, goes into the water for the first time, goes out of the dry dock, how it rocks back and forth until it kind of stabilizes itself. Kind of like that. Now, mutual funds also right, are not marginable for the first 80 days because mutual funds are always a newly issued security, right? Because every time someone buys a mutual fund, new shares are created that didn't exist before. Variable annuities too, because those are effectively mutual funds. Okay. Now, once the 30 days are up, then they can use it as collateral. So it can go from being held in the cash account to being held in the margin account. Okay. Convertible bonds, if they can convert to a marginable security, they also can be used as collateral for that loan too. All right. In a short sale, which we've discussed, right? That's a bearish strategy. When someone thinks the stock's going to go down, they can borrow shares of stock from the broker dealer. They have to have a margin account because they're still borrowing something. And they sell the stocks, right? They get the money, they borrow the shares and they sell them, and they get the money deposited to their account. But they can't take that money out, can't spend it. And like I said, they have to put 50% over and above that, okay? Because they have this liability. They owe their broker dealer like shares of stock, okay? Like our example, the customer shorts 1,000 shares of XYZ. So they owe their broker dealer 1,000 shares of XYZ stock. The plan is wait for the stock to fall in price, buy them back later when they're cheaper, use that to replace what they borrowed so they don't owe anything anymore, right? They've covered or closed their short position, but they get to pocket the difference. That's the plan, okay, if the stock goes down. Of course, if it goes up instead of down, they're going to lose money because they have to replace what they borrowed at even higher prices. All right, so Regulation T under the Federal Reserve says 50% down payment for a long account when they buy something, have to deposit 50% of the purchase price, and they sell a stock short, have to deposit 50% over and above the proceeds of the short sale. Okay. Now, by the way, that they set it at 50%. The Federal Reserve has the authority to change that requirement up or down from 50%. They can, but they never do. And they haven't since like 1974 because it's just such a small part of the overall economy. It just doesn't have any impact on monetary policy, right? It just doesn't move the needle. So now this is good for us, by the way, because by setting a minimum 50% requirement, it makes the math a lot easier than if it was 55 or 60% or something. Okay, now Regulation T says you have to put 50% requirement down. However, FINRA has another requirement, has its own requirement that they say any margin account must have a minimum $2,000 equity. So whichever is the greater requirement is the one we have to live up to. So if the if the purchase is more than $4,000, use Regulation T, right? 50% down payment. However, it's between $2,000 and $4,000. Okay, you have to have minimum $2,000 equity. So if it was for example, it's a purchase of $3,000, Regulation T says 50% or $1,500. FINRA, however, says minimum $2,000. So we use the FINRA requirement now. If it's less than $2,000, and you're just buying something, well, you can't lose more than the amount of your investment, right? So FINRA says you don't have to deposit $2,000, just pay for the trade in full. That's all that's what they require them to do. Just pay for the trade in full. Okay. By the way, had it been a short sale, let me write this down, and I say this because I've seen it come up. Okay, in a short sale, okay, that's less than $2,000. Okay, must deposit $2,000. Okay, it's not just the amount of the short sale; it's still got to be minimum 2,000. In a short sale, you can write if it goes up, you can lose more than the amount of your investment. So, okay, I mention this because this comes up a lot. See, most of the rules are really pretty straightforward. So what they really have to test you on are the exceptions to the rules. Okay, so that's why occasionally you come up with this. So watch out for these minimum required deposits because you might become so used to 50%. If it's smaller than that, you might forget about the FINRA requirement, and the test is trying to see if you can pick that out. Okay. Okay. Yes, Alexis.
So if FINRA requires that if it's less than the 50% or the $2,000 that you pay in full, is it still margin if you're not only doing half of it?
Okay, it's a marginable security, which means they can borrow
Okay.
its loan value, except that they require you have to have a certain minimum of equity on there. So,
Okay.
all right. So now, in a margin account, by the way, how much loan value does someone have? How much can they borrow against it? They always use the total sum value. of all the investments that someone has in their margin account, not each individual one, right? You don't borrow against this one, but not borrow against that one. It's borrowed against the entire margin account, whether they have one investment in their account or they have a dozen. It comes on the total value. Okay, good deal. Okay, now we've talked about a margin account. A cash account means, well, that investments have to be paid in full, in cash. Okay, so they buy $10,000 investments, must deposit $10,000. When do they have to deposit? Regulation T also says promptly, but no more than 4 business days after the trade date, or really settlement date of the trade plus a new 2 business days after that. Remember, the settlement date is the day money and securities actually change hands. That's the settlement date of the trade, which is in 2 business days. But Regulation T says people have to pay for their trade in 4 business days. So basically, in this case, the broker-dealer firm is kind of fronting you the money for a couple of days, but they're not going to wait too long on that. They've got 4 business days. Okay, so first off, the payment has to be made, well, it should be made by the settlement day of the trade, 2 business days. If it doesn't arrive, you get a Regulation T extension for another 2 business days. And then if 4 business days goes by and they have not paid for their trade, the check has not shown up, then what they're going to do is they're going to, well, basically liquidate securities that have been purchased but not paid for on time. And they're going to sell them out for what they're going for. And and then they freeze the account for 90 days. So it's a frozen account for 90 days. Now, it makes it sound worse than it is. Frozen account does not mean frozen assets. What it means is that for 90 days, the account's on a cash upfront basis. So before they can make another purchase, they must have money on deposit, right, and enough to cover the trade before they can purchase. So they can't buy now, pay later for 90 days. Yes, Amy?
I actually withdraw my question. I think I was not thinking it through. So I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. Well, if I think of something later, feel free. Okay.
Okay.
Now it says, well, what if the customer lost money as a result of that? Right? They bought it, they didn't pay for it on time, the firm sold out, and the customer lost money. Then that's how it goes. Right? If they didn't pay for their trades on time. Well, what if the customer made money as a result of that? Okay, and they sold it for higher than they paid for it. Well, then the firm, then they forfeit any gains back to the broker-dealer firm because they're not allowed to profit on securities that they have been purchased and not paid for on time. So it's a no-win situation, right? For failing to make trades based on time, which is, by the way, is why a lot of firms, their policies are cash up front, especially like those discount online firms. They don't want to go chasing after you, so their policy may be cash up front. Now, free riding is a violation where you bought something and didn't, right, and then you sold it. Okay, you bought it on Monday and sold it on a Tuesday, and didn't. Okay, now if you bought it on Monday, the settlement date is Wednesday, right? Right, so you should pay for your trade on Wednesday. If you sell it on Tuesday, the money doesn't get there until Thursday, also 2 business days. So the money arrives a day after it was due. That's called free riding. It's basically trading uses the house's money without having their own money on deposit, right? Without having any skin in the game. That is a violation. Now, notice the slide says intentionally buying and selling a security. Well, look, I worked as a rep and people did this accidentally a lot. They just didn't know. They thought if they bought it on a Monday and sold it on Tuesday, hey, you know what? There's the money you make for that plus a little something extra for me, right? Not realizing that was a violation. So that would happen, and suddenly their account's got this 90-day cash up front restriction on it, and they didn't understand, didn't know why. Okay. Oh, is it similar to check kiting? I'm going to confess here. I'm not sure what check kiting is. Is that when you write a check with deposit it later, make the deposit later or something?
It's when you write a check and you deposit the check and then you go to another bank. And you're sort of moving funds around and trying to withdraw funds when they haven't fully deposited.
I see.
Anyway, it's sort of like, in my mind, it's sort of like free riding.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty fair, okay, maybe not a precise definition, but pretty fair. Okay, question here says, does the investment company not recognize when this customer makes or buy a trade? Surprise it allows inside the institution. Well, like I said, people have time, at least, okay, according to Regulation T, they've got some time to pay for the trade, right? When they have to deposit the check. They can buy now and pay for it later, but it's still pretty quickly done. So they are allowed to do that. But if they find that they're not doing it, they're not paying for their trades on time, that's going to cause a restriction on the account. And again, you don't have to know this for the test, but when I worked as a rep, if people repeatedly kind of made these regulation T violations and not pay for their trade on time, that cash up front restriction can become a permanent restriction. Okay, not a testable topic, but still. Okay, here's the thing with a margin account. Okay, so margin account equity is for a long margin account, where it means what they own, is you take the total value of all the investments that they hold in a margin account. Again, whether it's one investment or a dozen investments, just all the investments that they purchase, right, that they own long, subtract out the debit balance. The debit balance is the amount that was borrowed against the portfolio. Now, by the way, do people have to use a margin account? No, right? It's kind of like a credit card, right? You can buy things on your credit card, and you get the statement. You can pay for it in full, and you won't pay any interest, okay? Or you can make the minimum required deposit, borrow the balance, and you'll pay interest on that, or any place in between. Same thing with a margin account, right? You can pay her in full, not use margin. You can press the minimum required deposit under Regulation T, or anything in between. Okay. All right. To find the margin percentage now, the equity percentage. Sorry. You take the total value, the value of their investments that they own, subtract out the debit balance, that's the equity, and divide the equity by the long market value, and that will give you their equity percentage. A $10,000 market value, borrow $5,000 cash against it, that gives you $5,000 equity. $5,000 equity is divided by a $10,000 total value or market value is 50%. Okay, remember, that's where it has to be, right? At least the initial requirement. Now, of course, you can go up from there, but hopefully it does, right? Okay, and then they'll sell the stock later and pay off their margin debit balance and keep the difference as profit, but except for the interest, of course. Well, it's got to stay at a certain level, though, right, before it can go down. But so if investments go down, can't go down too far. So if the market value falls to $8,000, they still took a $5,000 loan against it. That part hasn't changed. But if their market value is $8,000 now, subtract out the $5,000 borrowed against it, that's $3,000 of equity. Now, by the way, you can also think of this, let's say, like on a home, right? Okay, take the market value of the house, subtract out the mortgage, that's your equity in the house. Now, in this case, $3,000 worth of equity out of a $8,000 market value. So 3,000 divided by 8,000 is 37.5%. Now, if it's below the 50% margin requirement, the account is restricted. Okay. Now, restricted is not a bad thing. It just means that they don't have to add more funds. It's just that before they can place another trade, they're going to have to deposit at least 50% above the proceeds of that purchase before they can make that deposit. They don't have any margin value or any loan value because the account is below 50% requirement. Okay. Okay. Now, at some point, though, there's a minimum maintenance requirement. So debt to equity has to stay above a certain level. For a long margin account, FINRA says 25%. So it falls down to 25% of equity or below that. Now the account's in maintenance. Okay, and this is the bad thing, and that's where they get the dreaded maintenance call. You might have heard of a margin call. There's actually two margin calls. There's the initial margin requirement, that's the 50%, that's the initial requirement. Then there's the maintenance requirement, it has to stay, according to FINRA, above 25% of equity. And if it falls below 25% of equity, they get the dreaded margin call, maintenance call. And that's to say to immediately bring the account equity back above the 25% requirement. They can do that by depositing cash. They could deposit marginal securities to use their loan value. They get the equity up again, or they can sell something, okay, especially things that have been going down and put them in mains to begin with. All right, so they can sell any assets and use that to get out of the margin requirement. So they got to get it back above the 25% minimum. Now, having said that, firms can set their own minimum margin requirements. Very few firms will actually let it fall down as far as 25%. They can have policies that are more restrictive than the FINRA requirement, but just cannot be less so. In fact, the firm I used to work for, it was 35%. They wouldn't let it go down before 35% before getting that dreaded maintenance call. Okay, so when I took my test, all right, I had been trained on 35%, and I had to put aside the policies I was trained on to focus on the answers for the test, right? That was a little bit of a speed bump, okay, when I was taking my test. For a short margin account, right, when someone sells a stock short, Now, in this case, if it goes up, they're losing money, right? They're losing equity if it goes up instead of down. Okay, and but it cannot go below 30% of equity. And again, if that happens, you have to meet the maintenance call, get back above 30%. And again, I don't think this will be a testable topic, but firms do reserve the right to go ahead and liquidate someone's assets for them if they think the situation calls for it, just to go ahead and sell stuff out from under them without any warning, right? And without them saying, well, which would you want to sell? No, just do it, okay? If they think the situation requires it. Okay. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. Okay. So again, some things up here. Regulation T says 50% minimum initial requirement, like the down payment. 50% of the purchase if you of the cost if you bought something, or 50% over and above the proceeds of the short sale. Once they set the minimum maintenance initial requirement, if it goes up from there, all well and good. If their equity increases, but if the investments go down in value and equity decreases, well, then they have to maintain the minimum FINRA requirement, 25% for a long account, 25% of equity, and 30% equity for a short account. Now, if they do have equity greater than the minimum required equity, they can keep track of that. That becomes their line of credit, and they can use that to withdraw cash if they want to, or to finance the purchase of additional securities. They keep track of that in a special accounting method called a special memorandum account, or SMA. So once the account is above the minimum 50% requirement, they now have equity over and above the minimum required equity, or excess equity. Excuse me. And they keep track of that excess equity in an account. It's called a special memorandum account. It's kind of like basically keeping a side account of it. So what they can do with that excess equity above the required equity, they can withdraw that as cash, like taking a cash loan. They can purchase non-marginable securities, because that's have to be paid in full like cash, or they can use that to purchase marginable securities using again the 50% down payment requirement. So basically, they can take double that amount of SMA, that line of credit, and use that to purchase additional stock. Okay, let me see if they have a. Okay, here, let's take a look here. So this is how it works. Now, for the SIE, kind of know this in general, right? If you ever go on and take the Series 7, that's when you have to get a little more involved with this. Okay, so this is more Series 7 stuff here, but at least you want to know the concept. Here's the example. The initial margin requirement, you buy $10,000 worth of stock on margin. And by the way, when the test says they buy it on margin, go ahead and make the assumption that they just made the initial margin requirement, the 50% down payment, unless you're told otherwise. So they purchase $10,000 worth of stocks. They need to deposit half of that, $5,000. So $10,000 value minus the $5,000 debit is 5%, $5,000 equity, and $5,000 of equity divided by the $10,000 market value is 50%, right? Now let's say the stocks go up. Hey, that's great. They've now gone up to $12,000. They still have a $5,000 loan, but that's increased their equity, right? From 12 minus 5 is 7,000. Now, if you take that $7,000 of equity, right, divide by the $12,000 market value, that's like 58.3%. Okay. Now, how much is the required equity? They have $12,000 market value. Regulation T says you have to keep 50% of equity. Well, 50% of that is $6,000. That's their minimum required equity, $6,000. But their actual equity is $7,000. So they have $1,000 in equity over and above the minimum required equity. So that $1,000, that's going to be used they can use that as a line of credit. So that excess equity is a credit to their special memorandum account. What can you do with $1,000 of right in a line of credit? You can withdraw $1,000 in cash, purchase $1,000 worth of non-marginable securities like low-price stocks, or purchase $2,000 worth of marginable securities, right? Making again the 50% down payment. Okay. In fact, let me show you what would happen if they did that. Well, if they bought another $2,000 worth of stocks, so that would create their long market value. Well, that would now be $14,000. The $12,000 they own plus another $2,000 they just purchased. Now subtract the debit balance, right? The debit balance would be the amount borrowed. Now they didn't deposit more cash; they just borrowed basically another $2,000. So their debit balance would now be $7,000. That's the amount they own. So what's their equity now? Their equity is the $14,000 market value. subtract out the $7,000 debit balance, so their equity is $7,000. Okay, and so what's the percentage of equity? What's the percentage? Come on now. What's the percentage of equity? Well, if you take the $7,000 of equity and divide by that by the $14,000 of market value, guess what? 0.5 or 50%. So they're still right. So they've just used up their basically line of credit and got back to 50% of equity, which of course is what's the required of them. So that's how that. So see, it works out that way. All right. Now, what happens if bad things happen and now the market value falls to $6,000? Okay, so the $6,000 of equity, that's the value of their investments. They still have this $5,000 loan against it, though. They never made any deposits to pay that off. That only gives them $1,000 of equity. Well, $1,000 equity divided by the $6,000 market value is like 16.6%. So that's way below the 25% requirement. What's the maintenance requirement? 25% of $6,000, which would be $1,500. So they have $1,000 equity. They need $1,500 just to be at minimum requirement now, the maintenance requirement. So they're going to get the margin call or maintenance call for $500. You can deposit $500 cash, or sell off enough stuff, or deposit enough securities to get your equity above the minimum 25% maintenance requirement. Okay, if they deposit another $500, okay, that's going to use to pay off, at least partially. That's going to be applied against their loan. So now their loan is just $4,500, $6,000 worth of investments minus a $4,000 $500 loan is $1,500 of equity, and $1,500 is still right 25%, right $1,500 divided by 6,000 is 0.25 or 25%. Okay, how deeply you have to get into this for the SIE? Not this in depth. At least I don't expect so. Series 7, then you get ready for that. Okay, but that will be a while, right? Okay, all right. Other types of accounts are for fiduciaries. Now remember, fiduciary we talked about earlier, right? Under regulation best interest, BI, right? A fiduciary standard, that's where a fiduciary is someone who's basically handling someone else's assets. And as a fiduciary must put that other person's interest ahead of their own at all times. So they're right and acting on behalf of someone else. Custodial accounts for minors, a guardian account, that's maybe someone who's as an orphan or is mentally incompetent, or a trust. Remember, a trust is a legal entity. Money is being held in trust for a beneficiary. So a fiduciary has to manage the account. They do not have margin. They do not borrow against it unless, for example, if it's a trust account, the trust document must specifically say that buying on margin is all right. If it doesn't say it, then it's not. Custodial accounts, which are accounts for a minor, by the way, do not have margin because margin is putting a debt on the account and a minor cannot be put in debt. How much now, as a fiduciary, they must manage that other person's money according to the rules of what's called the prudent investor rule or prudent man rule originally. That means that, okay, under what's called the Uniform Prudent Investor Act. Let me see. Okay, I don't see it here, so let me write it out. Uniform Prudent Investor Act, which says someone basically, so when someone is a fiduciary who must manage someone else's money, they must do so as a prudent person would under those circumstances. What does a prudent person do? They do not take excessive chances with somebody else's money. To determine if someone is in compliance with the prudent investor rule, regulators would not look at any one individual investment. They would look at the account overall. Is the account overall being managed in a prudent fashion? 95% is in government bonds and 5% is some like Tesla. Okay, they might say that this is, all right, that might still be managed prudently because it's such a small amount in a highly speculative stock. Okay, this question came up today before class. What's the difference between a Uniform Gift to Minors Act and Uniform Transfer to Minors Act? Okay, when gifts are given to a minor under UGMA or UCMA, they are irrevocable gifts. It is the minor's property and cannot be reclaimed. Right? Okay, but of course, as minors, right, they'll have a custodian, right, account for them, and the custodian will handle those person's assets, the minor's assets, as a fiduciary, putting the minor's interest ahead of their own at all times. The only difference between UGMA and UTMA is under UGMA, okay, the account becomes the minor's property or becomes it in full. They can gain access to that once they're of legal age. Under UTMA, the transfer can be delayed until age 25. And in many states, UTMA has replaced UGMA. Oh, someone wants to join the call. Go ahead and let them in. Oh, it's Hannah. Okay. Okay. All right. For a custodian account, okay, the way the account has to be set up, there can only be one named custodian for one named minor. There's no such thing as joint custodian accounts. It's always for one minor's property, and only one custodian has to be named for it. Right? Who's responsible for handling the account? Now, they don't have to be related. It's usually their parents, of course, but they don't have to be related. They don't even have to know each other, really. Anybody who's of legal age can be a custodian for any minor. Okay. But the account is in the minor's name fully. So it's the minor's property, and they say custodian for the benefit of minor. Or as custodian, John Doe, custodian for right for James Doe under Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. So that's the account, the way the account must be titled, exactly that way. It's like Yoda at the end of Phantom Menace. Always two there are. No more, no less. A custodian and a minor. Okay. So that's the way the account is titled. Okay, okay. Glad you like that. Glad you enjoyed that. Okay. Okay. No, as I mentioned, no margin accounts. They cannot put a debt on the account. No speculative options. Okay, you cannot buy or sell calls. You cannot write uncovered options. If they're used for protection, however, covered call writing, because that's a risk reducing strategy. Buying puts on the securities that you already own, because that lets you basically sell it at a fixed price. As we said, that the gifts are irrevocable gifts. It is the minor's property. They just can't gain access to it until they reach legal age. We also, since it's the minor's property, the account's under the minor's social security number, and any income from that is the minor's taxes. That's right. So we've got 3-year-olds doing their taxes in crayons. No, not really, of course. Okay. But the idea, it is the minor's taxes. Okay. Now, there's a thing called the IRS kiddie tax rule. Okay. That makes it, okay, a kiddie tax rule. Okay. So that means like any investment income from that, for example, all right, is taxable income. If their income up to a certain dollar amount is tax free. Above that amount is taxed at the minor's rate. And since they're minors, it's probably at the very lowest rate. And then above another amount is taxed at their parents' or legal guardian's rate. And they do that just so people don't like shovel money to their children's accounts and have them taxed at their kids' rates rather than their own rates. Okay. Again, custodians must reinvest any cash within a reasonable amount of time. And yes, minors can sue custodians for mismanaging their account. Isn't that right, Macaulay Culkin? Okay. I mentioned that a guardian account is for a court appointment to protect someone who's a minor, maybe an orphan, okay, or someone who's declared mentally incapable. All right, now a trust account. A trust is a legal entity also. Like a corporation is a legal entity, so is a trust. A trust is established by a trustor or a trust grantor who sets up the trust, okay, and puts money into this trust for the benefit of one or more beneficiaries. That's who's going to get the benefit of that trust. It's for their benefit. So it also allows the trust grantor to determine, well, what do you do? What can you do with that money? In the place, a trustee will be appointed who will handle those assets as a fiduciary, putting the beneficiary's interest ahead of their own, and handle those assets according to the instruction given by the trust grantor. Trust can be either revocable or irrevocable. If the trust is revocable, then the trust grantor has the ability to change the terms and conditions of the trust, even take the assets back, even to name a new beneficiary. Okay, if suddenly you don't like your grandchildren anymore, you can name a new beneficiary. An irrevocable trust, however, cannot be changed. They cannot return the assets. They cannot name a new beneficiary, now without written permission from the beneficiary. And the trust, again, becomes its own legal entity, and the taxes are going to be the trust taxes. Since it is irrevocable, can't be changed, they are not part of the trust grantor's estate. So when the trustor, the trust grantor passes away, they're not part of their estate, they're not part of their estate tax. If the trust is revocable, then that means the trust grantor still has control and therefore can be part of the estate. Okay, now joint business and options accounts. Okay, joint accounts, that's an account that's owned by more than one person. Right? They're owned jointly between multiple people. A question here is, does a revocable become irrevocable upon death? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Okay. Yes, that still might be considered a revocable trust. There may be another trust grantor, for example, or someone else who has control over it. Okay, joint accounts is opened by more than one person. For the most part, when we've talked about account, we've talked about an individual account, right? That's one person's name on it, one person's property, one person's social security number for tax reporting. In a joint account, there are multiple people on the account, and we each have to know who they are. We need a name and social security number from everyone on the account, right? We need a signature, if required, from everyone on the account too. Now, while we have to get socials from everyone on the account, but the tax reporting, right, the 1099 forms are only one social security number. So all the taxes are reported under one social. All the account owners, they'll have to figure out for themselves how they're going to deal with the tax situation. All right, there are two forms of a joint account. There's a joint tenants with rights of survivorship. I usually don't see it like this. I see it as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, JTWROS. Okay. Or it's a tenants in common account. In a rights of survivorship account, everybody on the account owns the account together. Right? They own it all in full between each other. There's no you own this part, I own that part. Everybody owns it together. If one of the persons passes away, then the entire account goes to the survivor or survivors, and becomes that person, right? Becomes their property, and the account will be retitled in the name of survivor or survivors. Now, keep in mind, by the way, there can be any number of people on a joint account. It does not have to be two people only. It frequently is, but doesn't have to be. Okay, there can be any number of people on it. In a tenants in common account, however, in that case, in tenants in common, each tenant does have a specific percent of it. There's a you own this percent, I own that percent kind of thing. And if one of the persons passes away, then that person's portion transfers to his or her estate. An estate is a legal entity that holds the assets of a person who's passed away. And when it goes to their estate, then of course it goes through probate and ultimately distributed to that person's heirs. So married couples are much more likely to use a rights of survivorship account. So if one person passes away, it goes to the survivor. Business partners are more likely to use a tenants in common account. Having said that, I once saw a practice question that says there was someone, she wanted to, that had a joint account with her husband, but in case she passes away, she wanted money to go to her daughter rather than go to her husband, right? Because she wants to see her, she set up. They would actually have set up a tenants in common account at that point, because then when she passed away, her portion would go to her daughter, not to her husband. If it was her husband, right, if it was a rights of survivorship account, it would have gone to her husband. Okay, a transfer on death account, TOD. That's usually for an individual account, but it can be a joint account too. That's if there's a named beneficiary or beneficiaries on the account. So when the account owner passes away, it will go automatically to the beneficiary and does not have to go through probate. If you've ever had to deal with probate, you know what a blessing is not to have to deal with it. So, all right, so there's a named beneficiary on the account, and it goes automatically to that beneficiary. I've also seen it called transfer. I've also seen it called payable on death. So I'll write that out here. Payable on death, or a POD account. Okay. How about corporations? Well, corporations are a legal entity too, and corporations have money that the corporation can invest. So we can open a corporate account. Now, to open a corporate account, we need a couple extra things. One of which we need a corporate resolution. The corporate resolution tells us at the broker-dealer who exactly at the corporation has authority on the corporate account, who can place trades, who can get account information, and we can only talk to someone who's on the resolution. Tends to be usually the company treasurer. But if the CEO is not on the resolution, we can't even talk to the CEO. If there's ever a change in duties or personnel, we're going to need an updated resolution. We'll also need a copy of the corporate charter, which is like the bylaws of the corporation, if they ever want to have a margin or options account. If they want to like trade put or call options or buy on margin. So we need a copy of the corporate charter so that the bylaws say it's okay to have a margin or option account, or at least that it's not prohibited. If it doesn't, as long as it doesn't say they can't, then they can. That's different for a trust account. A trust account must specifically say, the trust document must specifically say margin or options okay. For a corporate account, as long as it doesn't say they can't, they can. A partnership too, by the way, a partnership's another legal entity, okay, where in this case, for a partnership account, well, then we need a partnership agreement to say that who exactly has authority, which of the partners are we able to talk to about the account. In a general partner, it could be either any of the general partners, but if it's a limited partnership, we only need the signature of the general partner, because remember, the general partner has the authority to bind the partnership, which means to enter into contracts. Limited partnerships, they're just basically the silent partners, right? They're the money partners, and they have no role in management or operations. Okay. Investment advisors, okay, which is different from a broker-dealer. Now remember, a broker-dealer, let's give you the idea here, okay? The broker-dealer, they're in the business to affect securities transactions, right? To execute buy and sell orders, either for its customers' accounts as a broker or for its own accounts as a dealer. Investment advisors, however, they're in the business to give advice about securities, okay, or analysis on securities, right? Or manage their customers' portfolios. And they get some kind of fee or compensation specifically for the advice or management. Broker-dealers make a commission or a markup for executing trades. So what's the difference? Because don't broker-dealers give investment advice? Don't they make a buy, sell, or hold recommendation? Traditionally, yes, they do. Difference is how they're paid. Broker-dealers get a commission or a markup for executing transactions. So if a broker-dealer gives advice, the advice is free. They're paid on implementation. Investment advisors are paid specifically for the advice, analysis, or money management. Okay, so this is someone basically has someone to manage their money for them. Okay, and they charge some sort of fee. Now, there can be any number of different business models. Some of them might charge an annual percentage of the money managed, percentage of assets under management for 2% a year, 1.5% a year, right, for their money management. Now, some of them might charge a flat rate. Some of them maybe it's an hourly consulting fee, and some of them actually also get a commission on products that they recommend. Okay, so whatever. So basically, they're paid specifically for the advice. All right, now investment advisors need the services of a broker-dealer to actually execute trades, to execute buy and sell orders, and usually also to hold the customer's assets. To be an investment advisor or someone who works for an investment advisor, it's called an investment advisor representative with a Series 65 or Series 66 license. Okay, now with investment advisors, just like broker-dealers, they cannot commingle the firm's assets with customers' assets. That's never allowed. But customers' assets can be all mingled together, however, because they do keep track and keep records about which customer owns what. They have one master trading account called their omnibus account. So all the accounts, right, they're grouped under one single account that they have with the broker-dealer firm, and then of course the investment advisor keeps track of which individual customer has assets. And I once saw this in action when I saw the firm I used to work for. When I saw its institutional investments where they work with investment advisors, they have the one master trading account, right? They'll buy $50,000 worth of a stock in their omnibus account, and from there they part it out to their each individual customer's accounts. Options accounts. Okay, now if you want to trade call or put options, if you remember, right, options can be used in a lot of different ways, right? They can be used to reduce risk or take on extreme amounts of risk. What they want to do, though, they have to basically qualify for each level, let's say, of complexity and risk. People have to progressively qualify. They have to fill out an options application form, again, paperwork, okay, in which they will attest as to their income and net worth, to their experience with options, and do they understand how well they understand. So they have to attest that they understand about that. So from that, there's someone at the firm, someone who specializes in this. It's called a registered options principal, or a ROP. Okay, right, registered options principal. Someone with additional licenses that's specifically for overseeing options accounts. So this registered options principal will then determine what level of options trading that they'll get. Now, firms might do things a little differently, but it's usually something like this. Okay, so the first level is usually like covered calls and protected puts. Okay, things that reduce the risk. The second level would be like speculative. Speculative. It helps if I can spell. Okay, call and put purchasing, buying. Okay, buy a call, buy a put because you think the stocks go a certain direction. The third level is for creating spreads. That's where basically you're using different options in combination with each other, right? Which reduces the risk actually of the trade, but also increases the complexity by quite a lot. So people have to progressively qualify that they understand that. And then the top level, which they can do everything, that includes uncovered option writing. Okay, which again goes to a very high degree of risk. So they have to demonstrate that they have the income, the net worth, and the experience to handle uncovered options writing. By the way, when I worked as a rep, very, very few people did uncovered options. It was quite rare. Okay. All right. So with that is the options agreement. So they fill out the options agreement form, and they attest to that they to their income, net worth, and they also attest that they read and understood the options disclosure document, the ODD. All right, you'll find how much they like their disclosure documents because they got to redo, right? They've got to disclose the additional risk involved. In fact, this document is called Characteristics and Risk of Standardized Options. Right? I used to keep a copy at my desk when I worked as a rep. In fact, they sent me another copy recently. It's got a whole bunch of extra detail. It goes into a lot of information about call options and put options, and actually into things that aren't even covered in the SIE or even the Series 7. So you don't have to worry about it too much. Anyway, the options agreement has to be signed and returned within 15 calendar days, right at the time. So the customers start trading up as soon as their options account is approved by the registered options principal, by the ROP. But they've got 15 days to return the signed options agreement. Why 15 days? Because that options agreement says that they read and understood the options disclosure document. Well, you need time to read it and understand it, so they'll give you that 15 calendar days. Now, if 15 days goes by and that options agreement has not shown up with their signature on it, then all they can do is do any closing transactions. They cannot open any new transactions. If they bought an option, they can sell it. If they sold an option, they can buy it back. But no new opening transactions until they've got that agreement with their signature on it. Okay, and that is our discussion today on accounts. And that brings us right about the time we need to be, right up to the quarter past the hour. So in the few minutes we have, is there any part of this that you'd like to get more detail, ask about, anything that's still on your mind? Anything I can help you with at all? Okay. All right. For everyone else, please keep up the pace on taking practice exams, on going through the material, reading the material, take exams. The mastery exams. I think you should have mastery exam number 2 by this point. If you still find that you're having a little trouble or keeping up with that, call me. All right. Email me. My offer to you. Okay. Oh, Amy's email address is here. Okay. Amy, I think are you putting that out for if you want to do a little study thing together? Okay, yes, okay. So if you're all interested in finding a group, and by the way, you'll find that very helpful. Some people they really thrive on that once they can talk about it to somebody and get somebody's information, because then they can. That's when it becomes internalizes for them. That's when they really begin to understand it. Say, well, I thought it meant this. No, I thought it meant that. That's when that's when they finally get mastery of a topic. And again, I heard from Bill at SCC. Right, there's a budget available for a tutor. Apparently, the tutor they had lined up kind of fell through. So I contacted someone I used to work with. I'm hoping he gets back to me on this. But they're making a budget available. So my recommendation: take advantage of it, use it, because right they're covering the budget for it. Okay, your work schedule. Yeah, I know we got to find the time that is, and that's not all that easy. Okay, Colby, right? That's your email address there too. Okay, now, like I said, I don't think I'm allowed to share it with you, by the way, because I think that's a privacy thing, right? I'm not allowed to give you each other's email addresses, but hey, if you can. Okay. All right, good. All right, so please feel free if you want to connect with each other. You take advantage of that tutoring, okay? So let me know. Send me an email so that, oh, thank you, Karina. Send me an email okay, that if you want to take advantage of tutoring, I can tell Bill at SEC, and he can get that all taken care of for you. Okay, there's funding available because normally if you okay, most places you go, if you want a tutor, you got to pay for it yourself. And folks, I'm expensive, so let someone else do that. My offer to you, by the way, is still good. Thanks, Leslie. My offer to you, right? You want to set up a 15-minute one-on-one, any topic you like, anytime you like, just email me and we'll arrange a call. Well, with that, folks, we are done for our session for today. Okay, it's my pleasure, folks. Again, we'll see you again on Wednesday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone. All right. And if you need any help in getting caught up with the lesson material, hey, give me a call. Okay, contact me. I'll see you again soon.